times recently, well, you've said it more than recently, that you use stats to kind of validate what you see and what you think about what you've seen. How much do you use analytics? How much do you go back and look at some of the stats? And has it ever kind of tweaked a little bit about what you saw and maybe change your take on how your team performed?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a place for analytics. Obviously I use numbers in, determining, where we want to be in regards to, rebounding, defense, taking care of the basketball, different stuff like that, how we're compared or our rank in regards nationally. I think those are things that I look at in those categories from a defensive standpoint, rebounding and taking care of the basketball. Also look a little bit at the pace in which we play at. But those three things I look at regularly in terms of defense, rebounding, and taking care of basketball. And there are marks that I want our team to consistently hit on that.
And coming out of the trip that you guys were just on, what are some of those numbers that are concerning to you that validate maybe what you saw or maybe enhance what you saw?
Well, from a defensive standpoint, the 6 halves in Maui, 3 of the 6, we've allowed teams to shoot over 50% from the field. That's not where we want to be. In the 3 games in Maui, teams were averaging 90 points per game. That's not good for us. That's not where we want to be. Rebounding the basketball in the 3 games in Maui were a -4. That's definitely not where we need to be. We've got to do a better job of getting to the offensive glass. And prior to Maui, I think we were number 1 in the country in terms of fewest turnovers. And in the 3 games in Maui, we averaged more turnovers than assists. And
a lot of points off turnovers.
And a lot of points off turnovers. And so you see and I've been clear and direct with the guys, those are the 3 categories that I look at every day for this team. And those are the 3 categories that have to be good for us to be good. And those are 3 reasons why we weren't as successful as we wanted to be out in Maui.
What? Go ahead, Chip. I'll get the next one.
They say good, strong competition early in the season can make you a better team. Do you feel like playing these teams that, even though it may not show up in the record, are making you a better team? Well, you mentioned the concerns, but also
yeah. Well, I mean, playing these type of games, whether and I just don't specifically point towards the 3 games in Maui, playing on the road at Hawaii, playing on the road against Kansas, playing at home against Elon. I mean, all of them give us a picture on things that we're doing well, that we want to continue to do well, and things that we need to address and get better at. And when you allow 50 points in the paint against Kansas and also against Michigan State, it gives you a clear picture of, from a defensive standpoint, things that may need to tweak or change or alter or pivot from in order to do a better job at protecting the paint. And so, yeah, I would say those 3 games, the competition, the level of competition, but every game I've gotten a clear picture of what this team can do really well and what kind of things we got to continue to work on.
Hubert, sort of along those lines, one of the things that seemed to keep happening in Hawaii was Elliott getting in foul trouble early. It was in Maui. It was even the Hawaii game too. Mm-hmm. What are the things that you think he needs to learn about when to turn on the aggressiveness, when to dial it back? Some of those were the chicken wing type fouls. Like what with that specific thing, that issue with him getting dinged with early fouls, what does he need to do better or improve on in that aspect?
Well, I think a lot of, those early fouls you talked about were, self-induced in terms of offensive fouls.
Yeah.
And putting himself in position to have early fouls and for our rotation to be a little bit differently because of that. I think in a number of those instances, especially Hawaii, and I can't remember the other game, I put him back in with 2 fouls, and I thought he did a really good job defensively of defending without fouling. And so that's something that not just him, but for all of us have got to do a better job at. one thing I didn't look at that I do pay attention to is, free throw rate. And I felt like, from a defensive standpoint, we did a worse job defending with fouling out in Maui. And that's something that's always been a strength for us offensively, our ability to create fouls and be able to get to the free throw line. I felt like teams did a better job of that. That's something that we need to improve on, moving forward.
Is that an adjustment for Elliott, how physical the opponents had been on him during that trip?
Well, I think the physicality in Maui was, it was more physical. It just was. There were bigger guards, physical, athletic, and playing at North Carolina, playing at this level, this is what you expect. And so there's an adjustment period in regards to that, and that's something that something else that we learned from is just a type of physicality, not only taking it but giving it back.
Hubert,
Not just taking it, giving it back.
just to follow up on that real quick, you hear coaches say, I'd rather have to tell you to slow down than to speed up. Like, I know it's a fine line in terms of Elliott, but like, do you have to have any sort of dialogue with him about maybe pulling it back every now and then, maybe some of those loose balls that he's gone for, you got a couple fouls that way?
Yeah.
Like, is that any sort of conversation you have to have, need to have?
No, in regards to like loose balls, like I'm not, effort is effort. I want you diving on loose balls. I want our guys, and I say this to them all the time, I want them to play fast and free. And so the conversations that I have with players in regards to dial it back is when it gets out of control. But one of the things that has been good for us is playing at great pace.
Sure, yeah.
And so, our transition game, our pace in which we transition from defense to offense has been really good this year. And so I don't want to dial that back. But just being aware of getting those extra fouls that could be eliminated, that's really important to us. And I think that's something that we learned over the last week.
Hubert, you touched on it a little bit, defending without fouling. What are some of the other things you've noticed on film defensively and stuff you have to teach, reteach, hone in on with these guys moving forward?
Yeah, it's interesting, when you play 4 games in 6 days or 3 games in 3 days, you don't really, it's not really, you don't get a chance to practice, you're preparing, and maybe some of the discipline and details, the things that you work on in practice, you don't have time to talk about and reinforce because you're preparing for the next game. And so defensively, we've got to do a better job guarding the ball, one-on-one, whether it's in the post or the perimeter. We have to do a better job at protecting the paint. We just do. We have to do a better job at communicating and talking. I've never seen a good defensive team not talk, not be good communicators. And this is probably the biggest area defensively, or one of the biggest, is being able to rebound the basketball. Our defensive rebounding percentage is not where it needs to be. And when the ball is up in the air, that's where at times we've struggled. And I've said before, it doesn't have anything to do with the size physically. It has, and not to say we don't have big hearts, but we got to rebound the basketball. We just do. And we got to finish those possessions with the rebound. And when we do that, that allows us to get out in transition where we've consistently been really good all season.
You mentioned the assist to turnover ratio and the increase in turnovers. When you looked at those 3 games specifically in Maui, what kind of theme maybe did you observe of the turnovers and why they were happening at a higher rate than previously?
I really believe that our guys are so competitive and they want to win that one thing that we haven't done really well is play well. We've been behind a lot in the first halves. And so in order to come back, guys want to make a play to get us back. We're down by 14, let's make a basket that ties it, and which can't happen. And so maybe doing a little bit too much for the right reasons have resulted in some turnovers, and I think we've always been a team that's been good to great, very unselfish, and we've got to get back to that and doing that.
And is that kind of just quick follow-up, kind of the message you've had for them since you guys have gotten back of, let's not try to do too much, let's just kind of, move it around, things like that? Like, is that kind of what you've been communicating to them the last few days?
I has, I just, we talked about a number of things, as I said, from an offensive standpoint, limiting our turnovers, making the easy play and getting back to taking care of the basketball. We've talked about offensive rebounding, like we've got to get to 3, 4, 5. To the offensive glass, our offensive rebounding numbers are nowhere near where I want it to be. In terms of our execution, better screening, better execution of our sets, and being in the right spots and being able to execute properly. And then I've talked defensively. We got to rebound the basketball. We've got to do a better job at shutting down the paint, and we've got to do a better job at communicating and talking. So those are things that, since we've gotten back, that we've talked about pretty much every day, and it's something that I'll talk about today at practice as well.
What lessons can you guys take from last year's Alabama game that can apply to this one? Obviously, the teams are different, some of the characters are the same, but is there anything you can take from that one and apply to this one?
No, I don't think there's anything from, last year's game against Alabama. Obviously, they're very talented, and they have a system and a way that they play. The way that they transition from defense to offense is real. Tremendous length and athleticism, and so we'll have our hands full on Wednesday. We're just really excited about the opportunity, one, being back at home and playing on our home floor, but also having an opportunity to compete against a really good Alabama team.
How about your style? Like, this year's team does seem faster, even more so than your previous ones, the transition game. Does that make you better equipped to play against that style?
I wouldn't say it's better equipped to play at that style. I mean, we were up 3 with 1:30 to go in the Sweet 16, so I thought, that's a pretty good spot to be in. We just, didn't make the plays down the stretch to be able to pull out the game, but we've got to do a great job rebounding against them. They go to the offensive glass, and I talked about their length and athleticism, so that's just going to have to be, that's an area that we're going to have to be really good at, and then also taking care of the basketball, because you mentioned they're just as fast as well, and they can convert turnovers into points better than most people in the country. So it'll be a fun game to play.
2 more. Hubert, you mentioned the first half deficits you guys have faced early on this year. Have you thought about potentially making a change in the lineup to start the game?
I've thought about everything. It's a great question. I've thought about everything in regards to what is leading us to being in those deficits in the first half. Is it rotations? Is it different start lineup? Is it combinations? Is it because we were in Maui? Or, I don't know. Those are definitely things that I'm looking at, and if there's something that needs to be changed or adjusted, I will, to put us in a better position to get off to better starts in regards to not having to come back in the second half, and we just got to do better at that.
After the
Regarding
Auburn,
Let's
go
go,
ahead.
Andrew.
Regarding the slow starts, and also a stretch late in the Auburn game when, I think it was the 10 to 4 minute mark, you guys didn't attempt a 3, but you were down between like 11 and 15. And then when you fall behind early, do you think you're getting enough looks? Are the guys maybe operating in a manner where they're getting the open looks, or they're looking for the open looks? Because you say they're trying to maybe do too much.
Yeah.
Are they losing sight of some of the other options that are out there?
I don't know, it's losing sight. I think, we got 15 guys on the team, and 10 of them are new. And I think this team is trying to find their rhythm. That's why we spend so much time together off the court. That's why we practice every day, in order to blend each and everyone's games together to fit together out there on the floor. And so, early in the season, it's always an adjustment period in terms of regards to, play style, roles. And as I said before, there are no roles. I'm not a role type of coach. Whatever's in your bag, that's what I want you to bring every day to the game. And I think every day we're getting better and more familiar with each other out there on the floor, and sometimes it takes a little bit of time.
As a quick follow-up to that, when you're behind, does it challenge that lack of familiarity a little bit more?
I don't know if it challenges it, but it's a position that I don't think is sustainable and I don't want to be in. You know, coming back from 18, 14, having to come back against Dayton, having to come back against Michigan State, Kansas, that's just not sustainable. It's nice to see that we have it in us to be able to come back, but it's a position that I don't think is sustainable. I think the position that we want to be at is to be consistent on both halves, and it really starts defensively. When you talk about being behind, and I said that 3 of the 6 quarters that we played in Maui, we allowed over 50% from the field. And I've said this to you guys, and I say it to the team, it all starts with defense. The success of this team is going to be tied to how good a defensive team we become and how good a rebounding team we become. It's plain and simple. It's right there.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,